Today's notes are about kingdom Protista. And when we talked about the kingdoms and defined the kingdoms, remember we defined Protista as being eukaryotes that were not animals, plants, or fungi. This is the kingdom of organisms where you put everything that doesn't fit somewhere else. If it's a eukaryote that is not an animal or not a plant or not a fungus, then it's going to be kingdom Protista. Most members of kingdom Protista are unicellular, single-celled organisms that evolved via endosymbiosis like we talked about last week. We will talk about the different groups of Protista. They're basically divided into three main groups based on what they're most like. The thing I want you to realize is by the time your own children are taking biology, this will probably be multiple kingdoms. When you look in your book in chapter 16, it actually talks about these groups that we're going to discuss as subkingdoms. There are three main groups of Protista: the animal-like Protista, the plant-like Protista, and the fungus-like Protista. The animal-like ones are heterotrophic. They are often called protozoa, which means first animal, and they're classified by their means of locomotion. That means how they get around, how they move from place to place. The plant-like Protista are autotrophic. They have cell walls made of cellulose. They have chloroplasts and chlorophyll, as well as some other pigments sometimes. Some of these also move around, a lot of them actually do, with flagella. Others just float in the water and so forth. There are two groups of plant-like Protista, the unicellular ones and the multicellular ones, and we'll discuss each one of those. And then the fungus-like Protista, which are also heterotrophic. Some of them are saprophytes, meaning that they live on dead and decaying material. Some are parasites. These, like fungi, they secrete enzymes to digest their food outside their bodies and then absorb the nutrients. But they don't have cell walls made of chitin. They do have centrioles, however, which is somewhat like animal cells. Examples of fungus-like Protista are slime molds and water molds, and these are the ones that you don't usually come into much contact with in your day-to-day life. Now, as far as the protozoa go, there are four different categories of protozoa based on how they move around. One group moves with pseudopods. A pseudopod means false foot, and this is the amoebas. The pseudopods are extensions of their body, and basically they flow from place to place. I'll show you a video in a minute or so that shows an amoeba moving. The second group is the flagellates. These have one or more flagella. Remember, those are long whip-like extensions. An example of this is Giardia, which causes diarrhea and is found in streams, which is why when you're camping you should always purify the water that you collect from a stream rather than drinking it straight, because you don't want to catch Giardia, which is very dangerous kind of diarrhea. The third group is the ciliates. They move by means of cilia, which are short hair-like structures that act like thousands of tiny little oars. These guys are fast. They zoom across the field of view in your microscope so quickly it's difficult to keep them in view unless you put some thick material on the slide to slow them down. And the fourth group is the sporozoans, which have no locomotion at all. They're all parasites. An example of sporozoan is Plasmodium, which causes malaria. Let's look at this short video of an amoeba in motion. Notice that it's flowing across. You can see the cytoplasm flowing as it moves its cell membrane out. Each one of these extensions is called a pseudopod. Not only does it move this way, it also eats this way. The pseudopods would surround a food particle and pinch it off into a food vacuole. There's no real distinct shape to amoebas. They assume all sorts of different shapes depending on which direction their pseudopods are moving. All right, next we have a video of flagellates and ciliates moving. There is a narration to this one. I'll also probably do a little bit of talking in it, so just pay close attention.
swimming in the direction of its larval flagella. These relatives of Protist also have two flagella which function differently. One eats in a coil around the cell. The other, as in Protist, extends forwards. Other algae have more than two flagella. This cell has 8, inserted through a deep foot. It normally swims very rapidly and had to be slowed down to have its picture taken. Large protists like Paramecium swim rapidly using hundreds or even thousands of flagella, or cilia as they are usually called. They are very agile as they search amongst the pond debris for food. Feeding in the cilia is coordinated, and the direction of feeding is reversed when the cell changes the direction it wants to go. This cell, like the last one, had to be slowed down in a sticky solution so that it could be photographed. Many protists also use their cilia to create currents for feeding, carrying nearby organisms close enough to be eaten. These algae are too big for this protist, but show the currents clearly. This large protisted cell called stentor feeds like a vacuum cleaner. A circular array of cilia around the flat end of the cell sucks nearby organisms into a conical mouth where it can check out what it is capturing. It is feeding here on green algae. Notice that it is quite selective about what it is, swallowing some of the captured cells and rejecting others. The cells of some tissues in animals have multiple cilia, like these cells cultured from lung tissue. The activity of the cilia is coordinated so that liquid or mucilage can be moved long distances over the surface of the tissue. Flagella and cilia contain a core of microtubules. Using polarized light for imaging the cells, the microtubules show up as a dark or light fiber inside each cilia.
Next, we have a short video of some Paramecia feeding on some yeast cells. The Paramecia is feeding on yeast. See, these are ciliated organisms. They have cilia all over their whole bodies. And the yeast that they're going to eat was stained with Congo red solution. The Congo red solution changes color depending on what the pH of the food vacuole is. And so you see the ones that they've just eaten are red, but the ones they've eaten earlier will turn blue as the pH changes in the food vacuole, like this. And so you can see here the Paramecium swimming around and eating. These have been slowed down because otherwise they'd be moving too fast for you to see. They've been put into some material that is real thick and goopy so that it's kind of like swimming in jello, so they can't move very fast. If you look closely, you can see the cilia in the picture. And you can tell, if you look real closely, you can see that there's cilia all over the whole body as it turns, as it swims through the water. Another thing that you find in a lot of these protozoans is something called a contractile vacuole. Now, these organisms all live in water, and as you can imagine, it's really easy for cells to take on extra water when they're living in a watery environment. There has to be an easy way to get rid of excess water so that they don't swell and rupture, like we talked about earlier this year when we talked about osmosis. And so a lot of these organisms have something called a contractile vacuole that contracts to release the water. The water will be absorbed or brought into the vacuole, which fills up, and when it reaches a point, it contracts real quickly to release the water. This video is very short, but it shows very dramatically what happens with the contractile vacuole.
The contractile vacuoles of ciliates are permanent structures that periodically squeeze excess water out through a tiny pore. In some Paramecium species, the contractile vacuoles have conspicuous feeder arms, but in most ciliates, the canal system is less apparent. And the
Watch here.
vacuole appears as a simple sphere.
It contracts very quickly and releases the water. Here's a diagram of a paramecium. You should have this diagram, this same diagram on your in your packet, and so you can pause the video here to label the paramecium. Something that isn't pointed out on your diagram is the trichocysts, which are little defense mechanisms. They're like little stinging barbs that can be ejected from the surface there to either paralyze a prey protozoan or to warn off a possible predator. You see here two contractile vacuoles, some food vacuoles here, an oral groove here where the food enters, and a gullet where it's kind of collected and then it pinches off into the food vacuoles. And here's an anal pore that actually releases the solid waste from the organism. The thing to really think about that's really interesting about these protozoans is they're single-celled organisms. They have one single cell, but they're very, very specialized and have lots of very specialized regions within the cell. Something you also see in paramecia is two nuclei. They have a micronucleus, which is a reserved copy of their genetic material, and a macronucleus that is the working copy. In the macronucleus, there are several copies of the chromosomes. They're all busily being used to take care of all these various many functions that happen within one cell. Now think about it for a minute. You are made of trillions of cells, but you have cells that are specialized to do certain jobs, and they don't do other jobs. This organism takes care of everything in one cell. So it requires a lot of genetic information to do that. Pause the video as you need to label the diagram. The next diagram on your packet is a euglena. This diagram of euglena is a little bit different than the one that you have. On yours is facing the other direction, and the eye spot is in a different place, and the chloroplasts look a little bit different. Okay, euglena often have an eye spot that is sensitive to light. It guides them toward light. Even though this is included in the animal-like Protista because it does move, it also has chloroplasts, so it can also make its own food. The eye spot allows it to move toward light when there is light present so that it can undergo photosynthesis. When light is absent, then it can eat other things. There are two flagella here, a long one which directs the euglena the way it wants to go, and the short one which acts more like a propeller to propel it along. This one shows a contractile vacuole here. In your diagram, it shows it farther back with some radiating arms. The chloroplasts here shaped differently. Yours kind of look like they're curved over like a little football helmet or something like that. And the other structure that yours has close to this end, it's actually turned around on yours, is the eye spot. So you can pause the video here as you need to label the diagram. Now, there are also plant-like protists. Plant-like protists undergo photosynthesis. They have chlorophyll and some other pigments which help them trap light. They are very important in producing oxygen for the air. Most of the oxygen produced in the atmosphere comes from the phytoplankton, the unicellular algae that are also the base of aquatic and marine food chains. And there are a number of different kinds of unicellular algae as well as multicellular algae. We'll continue these notes on another video that will take care of the plant-like and fungus-like algae.